The alien queen thought she married a common human until he revealed his true strength. Queen Lyra of the Centauri Empire stood on the high balcony of her sky palace, her silver eyes fixed on the twin moons rising over Zorath. The city below shimmered with soft blue light, its towers made of living crystal that pulsed like slow heartbeats. She wore a gown spun from moon silk, but her mind was not on royal matters. It was on Daniel, her husband. To everyone in the Empire, Daniel was a puzzle, a human from a small, quiet world called Earth. He had no armor, no energy blade, no military rank. He did not command fleets or lead armies. He spent his days reading old books, walking in the palace gardens and folding tiny paper shapes that made no sense to Centauri eyes. The court called him weak. They said Lyra had lost her judgment. Why would the strongest queen in the Galactic Alliance tie her fate to a soft-skinned creature who flinched at loud noises and asked polite questions about flower names? But Lyra remembered the first time she saw him. It was during the Great Peace Summit, held after the Third Border War. Earth's delegation was the smallest, just 5 people in plain gray uniforms. While other species boasted of their victories, Daniel stayed quiet. When it was his turn to speak, he did not give a speech. Instead, he stepped forward and placed a small paper crane on the council table. "On Earth," he said, voice calm, "we fold these when we hope for peace. This one is for you." Lyra had never seen anything like it. Paper was rare in the galaxy. Most worlds used data slates or light screens. But this was fragile, handmade, full of care. She kept it in a glass case beside her throne. And when Daniel asked to stay on Zorath as a cultural observer, she said yes. Weeks turned into months. They talked about stars, music, childhood memories. He made her laugh with stories of snow and dogs and something called pizza. She showed him the singing rivers and the sky whales that drifted between the clouds. Slowly, without either of them noticing, love grew. They married in a simple ceremony under the twin moons. No grand parade, no blood oaths, just vows spoken in 2 languages and a shared cup of Starbloom tea. The court was shocked. Many nobles refused to attend, but Lyra did not care. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a queen, but as Lyra. Now, 3 months into their marriage, the whispers had not stopped. Daniel still wore soft clothes. He still avoided the training halls. He still asked the kitchen staff how to make toast. Lyra defended him, but sometimes late at night, doubt crept in. Was he truly just a gentle soul? Or was he hiding something? Then the Krell came. They arrived without warning. Black warships tore through the upper atmosphere, their engines screaming like dying stars. The Krell were raiders, brutal, merciless, feared across 5 sectors. They burned cities for sport and wore the bones of their enemies as trophies. Their warlord, Vorlag, was a giant with eyes like molten rock and a voice that cracked stone. His message blasted through every comm channel in the capital. "Queen Lyra," he growled, "you rule with soft hands and weaker allies. Surrender your throne and hand over your human pet. If you refuse, I will melt your palace into glass and feed your people to my beasts." Panic spread like fire. Alarms wailed. Guards rushed to their posts. Lyra ordered the city shields raised. But she knew they would not hold. The Centauri fleet was scattered across the outer rim. Help would take days to arrive. They had only hours. Daniel found her in the war chamber, staring at the hologram of krill drop pods already landing in the lower districts. His face was pale, but his hands were steady. "You need to go to the deep shelter," Lyra said, not looking at him. "It's safe there. I'm not leaving you," he said. "You can't fight them," she said, turning to him. "You're not a soldier." He met her gaze. "Maybe not. But I won't let them hurt you." Before she could argue, the palace shook. Explosions echoed from the main hall. Krill shock troops had broken through the outer gates. They were fast, armored in black chitin, wielding plasma axes that hissed with heat. Lyra drew her energy blade, its blue light reflecting in her eyes. She would die fighting, but she would not let them take her home. Daniel stepped in front of her. "Stay behind me," he said. "Daniel, please." He raised his right hand, and the world changed. The air thickened. The lights dimmed. A deep hum filled the room. Not loud, but so powerful it made their teeth ache. The Krell soldiers charging through the shattered doors froze mid-step. Their weapons flickered and died. Their armor cracked with soft pops like ice on a warm day. One by one, they dropped to their knees, not from pain but from overwhelming pressure, like the sky itself was pressing down on them. Daniel walked forward. His body glowed faintly, golden light tracing lines along his arms and neck. His eyes, once warm brown, now shone like twin suns. He looked calm, but his presence filled the room like a storm held in check. "You do not belong here," he said. His voice was still his own, but layered with something ancient, something vast. With a small gesture, the Krell soldiers collapsed, unconscious but breathing. Outside, the warship shuddered. Their engines sputtered and went dark. Forlag's flagship tilted sideways, caught in a gravity field that bent space itself. Lyra stood frozen, her blade lowered. What are you?" Daniel turned to her. The glow faded. His eyes returned to brown. He looked tired but gentle. "I told you I was from Earth." "That's true, but Earth isn't what the galaxy thinks," he explained quickly. "Humans were not primitive. Long ago, during the Great Silence, a time before recorded history, Earth had been a battleground for cosmic forces. To survive, humanity sealed away its true nature. Every human carried dormant genes, echoes of that ancient power. Under extreme threat, those genes could awaken. Daniel had hoped never to use his. He believed in peace, in understanding, but he would not stand by while Lyra was threatened. "You married a lie," he whispered, shame in his voice. Lyra stepped forward and took his hand. "No, I married a man who chose kindness over fear. That's not a lie. That's courage." Together, they faced the crisis. Daniel reached out with his mind, not to destroy but to disable. He shut down every Krell ship without firing a single shot. He sent a message across all channels, his voice calm but firm. "Leave this system. Never return. If you do, I will not show mercy." Forlag, shaken and humiliated, ordered a full retreat. The black ships limped away, vanishing into the void. In the days that followed, the Xanthari people looked at Daniel differently, no longer as a weak outsider but as a guardian who held back the storm with open hands. The court stopped mocking. Instead, they bowed when he passed. Lyra held a quiet ceremony in the garden beneath the starvine. No guests, no speeches, just the two of them renewing their vows under the twin moons. This time there were no secrets. "You could have ruled galaxies," she said, touching his cheek. "I'd rather tend a garden with you," he replied, handing her a new paper crane. "This one's for peace." She smiled and tucked it into her hair. Below, the city glowed whole again, and high above, the stars watched over a queen and her human. Two souls from different worlds, bound not by power but by choice. The alien queen thought she married a common human until he revealed his true strength. Generations passed like falling stardust, quiet and endless. The names Daniel and Lyra became stories told by elders to wide-eyed children beneath alien skies. Their palace on Zorath stood not as a seat of power, but as a living museum of peace, a place where visitors from 1,000 worlds came not to seek weapons or treaties, but to learn how to fold a paper crane with steady hands and open hearts. Elena had long since joined her parents in the quiet beyond, but her legacy bloomed in every sanctuary, every school, every garden where a child chose kindness over fear. Yet the universe, vast and restless, never stays still for long. On the edge of the known galaxy, beyond the Orion Veil and past the dead zones where time frayed like old cloth, something stirred. It was not the hollow ones. They had faded into myth, their hunger sated or scattered. This was different. Older. Not born of hunger, but of loneliness. A being made not of flesh or energy, but of forgotten questions. It called itself the Last Echo. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, empires burn and crumble, love bloom and wither, and in all that time only one pattern gave it pause: the recurring appearance of paper cranes. Not as symbols of war or worship, but of hope that refused to die. It traced their path back through centuries, through colonies and capitals, until it found their origin. A human man, a Xanthari queen, and the quiet choice they made to love in a universe built on conquest. The Last Echo did not want to destroy. It wanted to understand, so it reached out, not with ships or weapons, but with a single question, whispered into the dreams of every awakened human across the galaxy. Why do you hope when there is no reason to? The question spread like a soft fever. Children stopped folding cranes. Teachers forgot the old songs. Even the starvines on Zorath grew dull, their light dimmed by doubt. In the House of Cranes, the air grew heavy with silence. People looked at their hands and wondered if kindness was just a pretty lie. On Zorath, a young girl named May felt the weight most of all. She was Elena's great-granddaughter, with silver eyes and Daniel's quiet hands. At 12 years old, she had already folded over 500 cranes, each one carrying a wish for someone in need. But now, when she tried to fold, her fingers trembled. The paper felt meaningless. "Why do we keep doing this?" she asked her grandmother, who had once studied under Elena herself. "Because it matters," her grandmother replied, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. May wasn't convinced. She climbed to the old balcony, the same one where Daniel and Lyra once watched the twin moons and stared into the sky. "If hope is real," she whispered, "show me." That night the stars blinked out one by one, not in fear but in sorrow. The last echo had arrived. It did not take form. It simply was, a presence in the air, in the wind, in the space between heartbeats. It spoke not in words but in feelings. The ache of being unseen, the weight of endless time, the crushing truth that all things end. May stood alone on the balcony, clutching a blank sheet of paper. She wanted to run, to hide, to give up. But then she remembered a story her grandmother told, how Daniel once faced an army with nothing but a crane and a song. So she began to fold. Her hands shook. The creases were uneven, but she kept going, whispering the old words as she worked. One fold for courage, one for kindness, one for those who feel alone. As she folded, memories rose. Not hers, but echoes of those who came before. She saw Daniel offering his first crane to Lyra. She saw Elena standing in a false city, unfolding truth one memory at a time. She saw countless hands, human and alien, folding paper in dark times. Not because they knew it would work, but because it was the only thing they could do. The crane glowed faintly in her palm. The last echo paused. "You do not know if it will help," it whispered into her mind. "So why try?" "Because someone might be watching," May said aloud, her voice small but clear. "Just like I watch the stories of my family. Maybe my crane will be the one that helps someone else keep going. And that's enough." She placed the crane on the railing and stepped back. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the crane lifted into the air, not with power but with purpose. It floated upward, glowing brighter with every foot it rose. As it did, the stars returned, not all at once but one by one, like friends coming home. The last echo did not vanish. It changed. It took the shape of a single perfect paper crane, woven from starlight and silence. It hovered before May, then gently landed in her hand. "I will remember," it said, not in words but in warmth. And then it was gone, carrying the answer it sought into the deep dark, not as a conqueror, but as a witness. The next morning, the galaxy woke lighter. Children folded cranes again. Songs returned to the halls of learning. The starvines bloomed with renewed light. And on Zorath, May sat on the balcony teaching her younger brother how to make his first fold. "Why do we do this?" he asked, fumbling with the paper. "Because someone, somewhere, might need to know they're not alone," she said, guiding his fingers. Far away on 1,000 worlds, new cranes appeared in unexpected places. A windowsill on a war-torn moon, a hospital bed in a refugee camp, the cockpit of a lonely scout ship. No one knew who left them. But everyone who found one felt a little less afraid. The House of Cranes did not need leaders anymore. It lived in every choice to be kind, in every hand that reached out instead of striking, in every voice that chose to sing instead of shout. The story of Daniel and Lyra was no longer just history. It was a living current flowing through time, carried by those who believed that love was the strongest force in existence. May grew up to be a teacher, not of power, but of presence. She traveled to worlds where hope had grown thin and sat with people in silence until they remembered their own strength. She never claimed to be special. She was just a girl who learned to fold paper and speak truth. And when she was old, she returned to Zorath and sat on the same balcony, watching the twin moons rise. Her hands were wrinkled, her hair white as moonlight, but her eyes still held that quiet fire. Beside her sat her granddaughter, a child with Daniel's smile and Lyra's gaze, holding her first sheet of paper. "Show me how," the child said. May took her hands gently. "First you fold the corner like this. And remember why you're doing it." The child nodded, focused. The paper creased. The wind carried the scent of starvines, and high above, the stars watched over a legacy not of empire but of empathy, because in the end, the universe did not bow to weapons or thrones. It bent toward those who chose to care, even when no one was watching, even when it seemed pointless, even when the night was long. And so the cranes kept folding, not because they could change the world all at once, but because each one was a promise that someone, somewhere, still believed in morning. The alien queen thought she married a common human until he revealed his true strength. In the weeks after the Krail retreat, silence fell over the Xanthari capital, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the quiet hum of awe. People moved through the streets with lighter steps. their eyes often glancing toward the Sky Palace where Daniel walked the gardens like any ordinary man. Children left paper cranes at the palace gates folded with clumsy fingers and hopeful hearts. Elders spoke of him not as a warrior, but as a guardian who carried storms in his bones yet chose to water flowers instead. Lyra watched him closely. She expected pride, maybe even arrogance after what he had done. But Daniel remained the same. He still woke early to watch the sunrise over the crystal spires. He still asked the cooks how to make scrambled eggs and laughed when they handed him something that looked like glowing jelly. He still sat with her in the evenings telling stories of Earth, of oceans that stretched forever, of forests where trees whispered in the wind, of cities that never slept but still found time to dream. Yet something had shifted between them, not in love that had only grown deeper, but in understanding. Lyra no longer saw him as just a gentle soul. She saw the strength beneath his calm, the discipline it took to hold back power that could shatter planets, and Daniel for the first time stopped hiding. He let her see the weight he carried, the loneliness of being the only one of his kind in a galaxy that thought humans were harmless. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching the twin moons rise, Lyra asked, "Are there others like you on Earth?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. "Yes," he said finally, "but not many, and most never awaken their gift. They live full lives, raising families, building homes, planting gardens, never knowing what sleeps inside them. The ones who do awaken, they usually do it in secret. To protect others. To protect Earth, why hide?" she asked. "Because power attracts predators," he said softly. "The galaxy is full of empires that would burn a world to harvest one awakened human. So we stay quiet. We pretend to be small. It's not weakness, it's strategy." Lyra reached for his hand. "You could have left. You didn't have to stay here. You didn't have to marry me." He looked at her, his eyes warm. "I stayed because I wanted to, not because I had to. And I married you because you saw me, not the power, not the secret, but me." Their bond deepened. They began to plan for the future, not just as queen and consort, but as partners. Daniel suggested opening cultural exchanges with Earth, not military, not economic, but simple things: art, music, food, stories. Lyra agreed. Soon Xanthari scholars traveled to Earth and human teachers came to Zorath. Children on both worlds learned each other's languages. A Xanthari poet wrote a song about paper cranes. An Earth musician composed a melody using the hum of Zorath's singing rivers. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy. Rumors began to spread, whispers in dark corners of spaceports, tales of a human who bent gravity with a thought, of a queen who now ruled with a silent weapon at her side. Other empires grew nervous. The Virex hegemony, once allies of the Xanthari, sent a formal inquiry. "Is it true your consort possesses forbidden abilities?" they asked. "Such power violates galactic accords." Lyra refused to answer. Daniel told her to ignore them. "They're testing us," he said. "If we show fear, they'll push harder." Then came the ultimatum. A council of 5 major powers, the Virex, the Orlan Collective, the Sylth Dominion, the Mirex Federation, and the Thalax Consortium, demanded that Daniel be handed over for evaluation. They claimed it was for the safety of the galaxy. But Lyra knew the truth. They wanted to dissect him, to learn how to replicate his power, to weaponize it. She called an emergency session of her inner court. Some advisors urged compliance. "He is one man," said Elder Corrin. "The alliance is worth more than his life." Lyra's eyes turned cold. "He is my husband, and if you speak of surrendering him again, you will find yourself exiled to the ice wastes." Silence fell. No one dared challenge her. Daniel, however, had a different idea. "Let me go to the council," he said. "No," Lyra said instantly. "Hear me out," he insisted. "If I run, they'll hunt us forever. If I hide, they'll suspect Earth. But if I stand before them, calm, open, unafraid, they'll see I'm not a threat. I'm just a man who loves his wife." Lyra hated the idea, but she trusted him. And so, under heavy escort, Daniel traveled to the neutral station of Helios 9, where the council awaited. The chamber was vast, ringed with observation decks filled with diplomats from 100 worlds. Daniel stood alone in the center wearing simple gray clothes, no armor, no weapons. The 5 council leaders loomed above him on raised platforms, their faces unreadable behind masks of protocol. "Daniel of Earth," intoned the Virex representative, a tall being with obsidian skin and eyes like cracked glass. You are accused of possessing unsanctioned bioenergetic capabilities. Do you deny this? No, Daniel said clearly. I do not deny it. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Then you admit to violating galactic law? I admit to protecting my home, he replied. And my wife. If that is a crime, then I am guilty. But ask yourselves, would you not do the same for your people? The Sylth delegate leaned forward. Your power could destabilize the balance of the galaxy. Why should we trust you? Because I have done nothing but offer peace, Daniel said. I disabled the Krell fleet without killing a single soul. I've shared Earth's stories, not its weapons. I've folded paper cranes while others sharpened swords. Judge me by my actions, not my potential. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Orlan Collective, a hive mind represented by a single soft-voiced speaker, said, You speak of restraint, but restraint can be broken. What stops you from turning that power against us tomorrow? Daniel looked up at them all. Love, he said simply. Love for my wife. Love for my world. Love for the idea that beings from different stars can choose kindness over conquest. That's what stops me, and that's what always will. Something in his words struck a chord. The Thalax representative, an old warrior with scars across his face, stood slowly. I have seen many warriors, he said. Most boast of their strength. This one hides his, and when forced to show it, he uses it to spare lives, not take them. That is not a threat. That is an example. The council deliberated for hours. In the end, they reached a decision. Daniel would not be taken, but Earth would be placed under a new classification. Protected neutral world. No empire could interfere with its affairs. In return, Daniel agreed to register his status with the Galactic Peacekeepers, not as a weapon, but as a guardian. It was a compromise, but it worked. When Daniel returned to Zorath, Lyra met his shuttle alone. She ran to him the moment the ramp lowered, throwing her arms around him. You came back, she whispered. Always, he said. Life settled into a new rhythm. Daniel's presence was no longer a secret, but it was no longer a scandal either. He became a symbol, not of fear, but of hope. Young Zenthari began studying Earth philosophy. Human values like empathy, forgiveness, and quiet courage entered Zenthari schools. Even the military adopted new protocols focused on de-escalation and rescue over destruction. Then came the day Lyra told him she was expecting a child. They were in the garden, beneath the blooming starvine. She held his hand and placed it on her stomach. There's a new life growing here, she said, voice trembling with joy. Half you, half me. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? She nodded. The healers confirmed it. Our child will be the first of a new kind. Fear and wonder warred in him. What would their child be? Would the dormant human genes awaken early? Would the Zenthari traits dominate? Would the galaxy accept a hybrid born of two worlds once thought incompatible? But Lyra squeezed his hand. Whatever they are, they'll be loved. As her pregnancy grew, so did their plans. They designed a nursery with windows that opened to the sky. Daniel hung mobiles made of folded paper stars. Lyra sang old Zenthari lullabies mixed with Earth melodies he taught her. They argued playfully over names. She wanted something strong like Zara or Kaivan. He suggested Elena or Maya. They finally agreed to wait and see. Then, one evening, as Lyra rested on the balcony, Daniel felt it, a ripple in the fabric of space. Faint but familiar. Like the Krell, but colder, sharper. He stood quickly. Someone's coming. Within minutes, sensors confirmed it. A single ship, sleek and silver, bearing no markings. It hovered at the edge of the system, scanning the planet. It's not Krell, Lyra said, studying the readouts. Not Virex either. The design is unknown. Daniel's face grew serious. It's them. Who? The Watchers, he explained in hushed tones. Long ago, during the Great Silence, there were beings who observed humanity. Not to conquer, but to study. They called themselves the Veiled. They believed humans were a failed experiment, a species too emotional to survive. When Earth went quiet, they assumed humanity had died out. But now, with Daniel's power revealed, they had returned to see if the experiment had succeeded. They won't attack, he said. They'll test us, to see if we're worthy of existing. Sure enough, a message arrived. Not through comms, but directly into their minds. Show us the fruit of your union, it said. Prove that your kind can create without destroying. Lyra was furious. They have no right. They don't care about rights, Daniel said. They care about balance. If we fail their test, they'll erase Earth from history. Quietly, completely. The alien queen thought she married a common human until he revealed his true strength. Time moved like a slow river through the palace halls, carrying with it the quiet rhythm of daily life. Daniel's hands, once smooth, now bore the lines of age and labor. Lyra's silver eyes still held their fire, but it burned softer now, like embers in a well-tended hearth. Elena had long since left the palace to walk her own path among the stars, but her presence lingered in every folded crane tucked into bookshelves and windowsills. The House of Cranes had grown into a network of sanctuaries across the galaxy, small places where the lost, the broken, and the awakened could find rest. And still the galaxy watched, not with suspicion anymore, but with something close to reverence. But peace is never final. It is a choice made again and again, even in old age. One morning, as Daniel watered the star vines in the east garden, a signal pulsed through the palace comm, a frequency not used in decades. It was Earth's emergency beacon, coded with a pattern only he would recognize. His blood ran cold. No one on Earth used that signal unless the planet itself was in danger. He found Lyra in the observatory, studying a strange energy ripple near the Sol system. "It's happening again," he said, voice low. She turned, her face already knowing. "The Hollow Ones?" "Or something worse," he replied. They called Elena. She arrived within hours, her ship streaking through the atmosphere like a falling star. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver like her mother's, but her eyes still held that same quiet strength. She brought news from the outer colonies, entire systems going dark, not just vanishing, but rewriting themselves. Histories changed. Languages forgotten. People waking up believing they had always belonged to a different world. It was not erasure this time. It was replacement. "They're not just taking potential," Elena said, her voice tight. "They're building something new from what they steal." Daniel understood. The Hollow Ones had evolved. They were no longer scavengers of hope. They were architects of false realities. And Earth, with its deep well of human memory and emotion, was their next foundation. They could not fight this with ships or shields. This was a war of memory, of identity, of truth, and only those who carried both human and Xanthari essence, only Elena, could walk between the real and the rewritten without losing herself. "I have to go back," she said. Lyra reached for her hand. "You don't have to do this alone." "I won't be," Elena said, glancing at her father. "I'll carry your stories with me. Every crane, every song, every word you ever taught me." Daniel gave her a small box. Inside were 100 paper cranes, each folded from pages of his old Earth journals. Notes about snow, about his mother's laugh, about the first time he saw the ocean. "These are anchors," he said. "When the world feels wrong, unfold one. Remember who you are." She kissed them both and left before dawn. On Earth, chaos reigned. Cities stood intact, but the people moved like ghosts, speaking in languages that never existed, worshipping gods no one had named. The sky shimmered with unnatural colors. The oceans whispered in voices that were almost human, but not quite. Elena landed in what was once New York, now called Vexara, a city of mirrored towers that reflected nothing real. She walked the streets, holding one of her father's cranes in her palm. With every step, the false reality pushed against her mind, trying to rewrite her memories to make her believe she had always lived here, always served the new order. But the crane glowed faintly, and in its light, she remembered her mother's lullaby, her father's hands folding paper, the smell of rain on Zorath soil. She found the source in the heart of the city, a great spire made of black glass pulsing with stolen time. Inside, the Hollow Ones waited, not as shadows now, but as figures wearing the faces of those they had consumed. One wore the face of a child she once saved on Series 9. Another wore the face of an old Xanthari teacher who had died peacefully in his sleep. "Join us," they whispered in 1,000 voices. "Your pain will end. Your love will be preserved forever in our perfect world." Elena stood tall. "You don't preserve love. You copy it. And a copy is not the same as the real thing." She unfolded the first crane. As the paper opened, a memory bloomed in the air, a summer day on Zorath. Her father teaching her to fold her first crane, her mother laughing as it floated away on the wind. The spire shuddered. The false faces flickered. She unfolded a second. A rainy afternoon on Earth. Daniel showing her how to make pancakes, flour in his hair. Music playing softly in the background. The ground cracked. The sky bled blue for a moment. Crane after crane, she released the truth. Each memory was a thread of real love, real pain, real choice. and together they wove a net of reality so strong the hollow ones could not tear it. The spire collapsed. The false city dissolved like mist. People fell to their knees, weeping as their true memories returned. The hollow ones did not scream. They simply unraveled, their stolen forms dissolving into ash that carried no weight, no name. Elena stayed on Earth for weeks, helping the world heal. She taught survivors how to fold cranes, not as weapons but as reminders. Your memories are yours, she told them. No one can take them if you hold them close. When she returned to Zorath, Daniel and Lyra were waiting on the balcony, just as they had been on the day they first fell in love. She ran to them, tears in her eyes, and held out a single crane made from the last page of her journal. "It's over," she said. Daniel took it gently, for now, because they all knew the truth. There would always be shadows. There would always be those who feared love more than war. But as long as someone remembered how to fold a crane, how to choose kindness over fear, how to stand still in the storm, the light would never go out. In the years that followed, Elena became more than a teacher, she became a legend. But she never called herself that. She simply lived, loved, and listened. She married a botanist from the moss domes of Ceres 9 and had 2 children, both of whom could make flowers bloom with a song. She taught them to fold cranes before they could walk. Daniel and Lyra grew older, their steps slower, their voices softer, but every evening they still sat on the balcony, watching the twin moons rise. Sometimes they would find new cranes left by visitors, refugees, students, former enemies who had found peace. They never threw them away. They kept them in glass cases like treasures. One winter, Daniel fell ill, not from injury but from time. His body, once capable of bending gravity, now struggled to climb the palace stairs. Lyra never left his side. She read him stories from Earth, sang him Zinthari lullabies, and folded cranes with trembling fingers. On his last night, the sky was clear. The twin moons shone bright. Elena sat at his bedside, holding his hand. He looked at her, then at Lyra, and smiled. "I lived a good life," he whispered, "because I loved you both." He closed his eyes, and as he took his last breath, every paper crane in the palace lifted into the air, glowing with golden light, circling the balcony like stars come home. Lyra did not weep loudly. She grieved in silence, as queens do. But in the quiet hours, she would sit in the garden, folding cranes alone, whispering stories to the wind. Years later, when she too passed, they buried her beside him beneath the starvine. Elena placed a single crane on their shared stone, a perfect fold made from the last page of Daniel's journal. And still, the house of cranes grew. Across the galaxy, children learned that strength was not in how loud you shouted, but in how softly you could hold someone's heart. Ships flew with paper cranes painted on their hulls. Peace treaties were signed with folded paper instead of blood oaths. Long after their names faded from official records, their story lived in songs and gardens, in the quiet act of folding paper with care. Because in the end, the most powerful thing in the universe was not a weapon, not a throne, not even a queen or a guardian. It was a choice, and they chose love every single time. The alien queen thought she married a common human until he revealed his true strength. Years passed like falling leaves, quiet and steady. Elena grew tall and bright, her silver eyes holding the calm of her mother and the warmth of her father. She walked the palace gardens barefoot, whispering to the starvines as they curled around her fingers. By the time she was 10, she could fold a paper crane with one hand while reciting Zenthari poetry with the other. Daniel watched her with pride that never swelled into boastfulness. Lyra saw in her daughter the future she once only dreamed of, a bridge between worlds, not a weapon, but peace, even the deepest kind, is never without its shadows. Rumors began again, not from empires this time, but from the fringes of known space. Scattered colonies reported strange disappearances, entire villages gone, not destroyed, but simply empty. No signs of struggle, no energy traces, just silence. At first, the Zinthari Council dismissed it as panic or pirate raids. But when 3 human outposts near the Orion Veil vanished in the same way, Daniel grew still. He knew that silence. It was the kind that came before a storm no one saw coming. One evening, as the twin moons cast long shadows over the palace, Daniel stood alone on the balcony, staring into the dark. Lyra found him there, his hands resting on the railing, his face unreadable. "You feel it too," she said, not as a question. "It's not the Krell," he replied, "not the Veiled. This is older, colder." He told her of stories passed down in secret among awakened humans, tales of the Hollow Ones, beings who fed not on flesh or energy but on potential. They did not kill. They erased. They took entire civilizations at the moment of their greatest promise and folded them into nothingness, like crumpling a page before the story could be read. They were drawn to hope, to new life, to unions like theirs. "They're coming for Elena," Lyra whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or maybe they're coming for what she represents." They increased security, but not with weapons. Daniel knew force would not work against something that existed between moments. Instead, he taught Elena how to shield her mind, how to anchor herself in the present, how to fold her thoughts like paper. Simple, strong, unbreakable. She learned quickly. One night she woke screaming, saying she saw faces with no eyes in her dreams. Daniel held her until dawn, humming an old Earth lullaby. Then the first sign appeared. A single black feather, smooth as obsidian, lay on Elena's windowsill. It was not from any bird in the galaxy. It carried no scent, no energy signature, but when touched it left a chill that lingered for hours. Daniel burned it in a bowl of salt and starlight, muttering words in a language Lyra had never heard. "They're testing the walls," he said. Days later, the palace's time sensors flickered. Clocks ran backward for 7 seconds. Flowers bloomed and withered in the same breath. Elena's paper cranes turned gray and crumbled to dust. Daniel knew they were close. He made a decision. "We have to leave Zorath." "Leave?" Lyra asked. "This is our home, and that's why they'll strike here," he said. "They want to prove that even the strongest bond can be undone. If we stay, they'll use the planet itself against us. But if we go somewhere unexpected, somewhere small, forgotten, they won't look there." So they fled not as queen and consort, but as a family. They took only what they could carry: a few clothes, a box of paper, Elena's favorite crane, and a locket with a picture of Earth's blue sky. They boarded a small civilian shuttle, unmarked, and vanished into the outer rim. They landed on Ceres 9, a dusty mining moon orbiting a dead star. No one lived there except a handful of retired engineers and a botanist who grew moss in sealed domes. The air was thin, the sky always twilight, but it was quiet, safe, anonymous. They rented a small dome with a view of the asteroid belt. Daniel fixed broken solar panels for credits. Lyra taught local children how to weave light threads into cloth. Elena played in the red dust, building castles and folding cranes from recycled packaging. For the first time, they were just a family. No titles, no expectations, no galaxy watching. But the Hollow Ones did not forget. One night, the stars outside the dome went out. Not dimmed, gone. The sky became a perfect black void. Inside, the lights stayed on, but the shadows grew too long, too sharp. Elena clung to her mother, her eyes wide. "They found us," Daniel said. He lit a circle of candles made from beeswax and xanthary resin. He placed Elena in the center and told her to fold a crane, any crane, as long as it came from her heart. Then he stood at the edge of the circle, his hands open, his breath slow. The air grew cold. The walls of the dome seemed to breathe. Shapes moved in the corners of the room, tall, thin, with no faces, only hollows where eyes should be. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their presence alone made time stutter. Daniel did not fight them. He sang. It was an old Earth song, one his grandmother used to hum, a simple tune about rain and home and waiting. As he sang, the golden light returned to his skin, not as a weapon, but as a shield. The light wrapped around Elena, around Lyra, around the tiny dome. The Hollow Ones recoiled, not from pain, but from something they could not consume. Love that chose to stay, even in fear. Elena finished her crane. It glowed softly, pulsing like a heartbeat. She held it up, and the black sky outside flickered. One star returned. Then another. Then the whole belt. The Hollow Ones faded like smoke in morning light. When dawn came, the sky was normal again. The dome was warm. Elena slept in Lyra's arms, the crane still clutched in her hand. They stayed on Ceres 9 for 3 more months, long enough for the fear to settle, long enough for Elena to laugh again without looking over her shoulder. Then quietly, they returned to Zorath. The people welcomed them not with fanfare, but with folded cranes left on every doorstep. The court said nothing. They had seen the empty throne, the silent palace, and understood. True strength was not in holding power, but in knowing when to walk away and when to come back. Life resumed, but changed. Daniel no longer hid. He opened a school in the lower city, teaching children from all species how to fold paper, how to listen, how to stand still in a storm. Lyra reformed the Royal Guard, not as warriors, but as peacekeepers trained in empathy and conflict resolution. Elena became a storyteller, weaving tales of Earth and Zorath into songs that traveled across the galaxy. Then came the day a young human boy arrived at the palace gates. He was thin, scared, with eyes too old for his face. He carried nothing but a worn backpack and a single paper crane. When asked his name, he whispered, "Jake." He told them he was from a colony near Alpha Centauri. His parents were gone, vanished in the night like so many others. He had heard stories of a human who lived among stars and protected the weak. So he stole a shuttle and flew for weeks just to ask one question. "Am I like you?" he asked Daniel, voice trembling. Daniel knelt before him. "Do you feel things deeply? Do you want to help others even when it's hard?" The boy nodded. "Then yes," Daniel said. "You are like me." They took him in. Lyra gave him a room next to Elena's. Elena taught him how to fold cranes. Daniel taught him how to breathe through fear. Within a year, Jake could calm a frightened animal with a touch and make plants grow faster with a song. More came after that. Other awakened humans, lost and alone, drawn by whispers of a safe place. Daniel and Lyra turned part of the palace into a sanctuary, not a fortress but a home. They called it the House of Cranes. The galaxy watched, wary at first. But when raiders attacked a nearby colony and the House of Cranes sent not soldiers but healers and builders, even skeptics began to believe. The Virex hegemony sent observers. The Orlan Collective offered resources. The Sylth Dominion asked to send students. Daniel never claimed to lead. He simply showed up. He listened. He folded paper. He reminded everyone that strength was not in how hard you could hit, but in how gently you could hold someone's hand when they were breaking. Years turned into decades. Elena grew into a wise young woman, her voice carrying the same calm power as her father's. She traveled the stars not as a princess, but as a teacher. She stood on war-torn planets and taught children to fold cranes instead of weapons. She sat with grieving leaders and reminded them that peace was not weakness. It was the hardest choice of all. Daniel's hair turned gray. Lyra's steps slowed, but their love never dimmed. They still sat on the balcony every evening, watching the twin moons rise. They still folded cranes together. Sometimes they would find new ones on the railing, left by visitors, by students, by strangers who had been changed by their story. One night, as they sat in comfortable silence, Lyra leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met?" "Every day," he said softly. "And every day I'm glad we did," she smiled. "Me too." Far away on 1,000 worlds, paper cranes fluttered in the wind, symbols not of fragility but of hope that refused to break. And in the heart of the Xanthari Empire, a human and his queen proved that the most powerful force in the universe was not gravity, not time, not even stars, but love that chose to stay, to protect, to believe, and that was enough.